by doing the radio show, I would be about 5 years ahead of the industry in terms of what people were talking about.
Because it's a live call-in show.
People are calling. And I said, there are more women buying guns for self-protection than you're aware of. There are more seniors buying guns for self-protection than you're aware of. And people are buying guns for self-protection. You don't understand what's going on out here. This is why people buy guns.
I'm Ryan Gresham, and this is Gun Talk Nation. This Gun Talk Nation is brought to you by SDS Imports, SecureIt, Ruger, Range Ready, and Stag Arms. Hey, welcome into Gun Talk Nation. Today on the show, a guy that we just met the other day, Tom Gresham, a.k.a. Dad.
Well, just hanging out, just wandering around, looking lost again.
Yeah, he looked lost, and so you said, hey, you want to do a podcast?
I got nothing else to do, right?
So I was thinking about this morning because I wonder if people go, well, this is like, that's your dad. Yeah. But like work stuff, it's easier to say, oh, it's Tom, this and that. It was kind of a conscious decision.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to keep calling me Dad the whole time? No,
Dad said you need to do this.
It's a work environment, I mean, and we've been working together for more than 10 years now. You've been doing Gun Talk.
Well, we're in season 16 of Guns and Gear.
So it's been 16.
So 16 or 17.
What is it you always tell me? However long I think it is, double it.
It's longer. Yeah. Man, that must have been like 15 years ago. That was probably 25 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Gray hair. It kicks in now and then.
Well, I thought we've had you on before, but I thought I think people would like to know, how did this thing come together, and talk about kind of where this all started for you, upbringing, just kind of talk about growing up. I mean, I think a lot of people know your dad was Grits Gresham, my grandfather, but what was that like growing up? And because people say, I grew up around guns, I grew up in it, grew up in the outdoors. I mean, where did this start for you? When did you start thinking like this would be a job?
Never did. That was interesting. I never made a conscious decision that this is what I wanted to do. It's just kind of like I grew up doing it. And I think it was because we didn't have child labor laws. So I was forced to work at an early age, kind of like you were. Here, hold this knife, hold this gun, hold this thing while I'm taking pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you were doing. That's what I was doing from a very early age. My dad, your grandfather, Grits, was a gun writer, an outdoor writer, wrote about hunting, wrote about fishing, guns, environment, and that's all I ever knew. So when I was very young, we always had a lot of guns in the house. We were always going out to the range, and at a certain age, probably 12, 13, he started having me shoot pictures for him because he needed photographs of him.
Oh, sure.
And
so he was a photographer, but...
He was a photographer, but how are you going to get pictures of yourself?
Yeah.
Right? And that's how I got into this, was through the photography. I enjoy that a lot. And so I started taking pictures. And it's interesting. I had one of those moments that still sticks with me. It's that moment when you switch a little bit from being just the son to being maybe something a little bit more. I was taking pictures of him for one of his books, and I'm looking through the camera, and he said to me, he says, how does that look?
He wanted your opinion.
It was the first time he asked my opinion. I knew he valued it. He was trusting me to tell him, how does this photograph look to you? Going, okay, that was interesting. I like that. So I ended up doing the photography, and then by the time I was 18, I was co-authoring a syndicated column with him called Bayou Browsing.
Yep.
Ran in about 30 newspapers around Louisiana.
You got to tell people how that worked as a business, because it's just funny. It's just goofy.
It's a great story, and it's very instructive for a business standpoint. My dad decided that he wanted to write a syndicated newspaper column in Louisiana.
About the outdoors.
About the outdoors.
Hunting, fishing.
Right. So he sent letters to every editor, every publisher of every newspaper in the state, explaining how this is what they needed. They needed to be covering the outdoors. It was a big deal, and he was the guy and all that, and just sat back to wait for the letters to pour in to get all this money. Got one response, and it was no.
At least they responded. And of course, back then, it's not an email or a text or anything.
No, it's a mail.
You have to write the letter
right.
to say no.
So he said, okay, that didn't work. What am I going to do here? So he got in the car. He drove around the state and visited every single, and there were, back then, every little town had a newspaper.
Right.
I mean, every town had a newspaper. And he would go talk to him, make his pitch. And he said, great story. He's talking to this old newspaper editor. This guy sat back there just listening to his pitch, and Grits is going on and on about how, we need to cover the outdoors, and it's important in Louisiana, and all your readers, and guys sat there, and finally Dad stopped. He says, you done, son? He said, well, yes, sir. He says, okay. He says, I don't want your column. He says, I don't need your column. He says, I'm the only newspaper in town. If anybody wants to advertise here, they advertise with me. Thank you.
Wow.
That was a business lesson right there.
Mm-hmm.
So to take it forward, say, okay, how do I make this work? So he said, what this guy wants is advertising dollars. So then Grits went around and made another pass, and then he would go to a sporting goods store or a gas station or somebody in town. Would you sponsor the column? And then go to the newspaper and said, if I paid you, or if you got it for free, however they worked it out. So for years, and I did the billing on this, we got $10 per month per newspaper, $2.50 a week.
Oh, wow.
For this column. It's like, okay, we'd write it, we'd run it off with a mimeograph machine, stuff the envelopes, have to mail it out, the whole deal.
But he was getting a sponsor of the column?
He sold the sponsorship for the column and then wrote the column, and then the newspaper got it for free. They said, well, yeah, we'll do it for free.
Yeah.
It's a free copy.
It cost you nothing.
We'll run that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you wouldn't get actually paid. You do a trade out with a sporting goods store or a gas station and get what you could get out of it.
I mean, so you grew up in it. I mean, you were from an early age helping shoot photos and helping write articles and all that stuff. And you said, well, you never thought about it. It just kind of ended up, this is where you went with it. What do you think you would have done if you hadn't done the gun media outdoor industry thing?
Oh, that's interesting. I can't say that I've actually really thought about it.
It wasn't like, well, maybe I'll go be a fireman or architect or whatever.
I would never have wanted to actually get into a legitimate line of work. Instead, I do this the gig, and like I said, I like photography. I went and studied photography and photojournalism, and kind of got crosswise with my instructors at the University of Missouri because I think they didn't like, number one, that it was the outdoors I was working in. Number two, I was already writing and working in this business. Mm-hmm. They wanted to tell me how to do it. I'm thinking, well, I'm already doing it.
Yeah.
And then just kind of stumbled through in typical fashion. When you're young, you think you know a lot of stuff. When I was talking to the school counselor going in, they said, well, you have to take these classes. You have to take this editing class. I said, well, I'm a writer. I don't need to take an editing class. And of course, after I got out of college, I spent the next 12 years as a magazine editor.
Right.
So much, for knowing what you're going to do.
Why am I going to need this? Well, I don't know, but you might.
Yeah, you might. Or as I have learned, there's no such thing as useless information.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you go from there? I mean, after college, you didn't do radio because, I mean, we haven't gotten to that part in the story yet, but talk about this journey.
Well, I ended up I freelanced for a year, which means starving, which is fine.
Well, see, that's the point when you start, I'm thinking you're saying, well, if this writing thing doesn't work out, I'm going to go,
Oh, I had no backup plan.
So you would, what they say, they burn the ships.
I did. I just okay, we got down to $8 in the bank account at one point. And it was like, back then, like you say, you mail the article off and you hope that somebody buys it. And the magazines were pay on publication. So if they decided to use it, they wouldn't pay you for it until they published it. It might be 3 months. It might be a year later.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know. You're just waiting by the mailbox every day. Maybe the check comes, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a rejection slip.
Yeah.
But I did learn, and this is another business lesson, if you send out one article, you're waiting for that. When you get a rejection slip, it really hurts. But if you have 50 proposals out and you get a rejection slip, it's not a big deal.
Right.
So it's a numbers game, as you know only too well, right?
Yes.
It's a numbers game.
Yes.
So then I ended up going to Southern Outdoors. I edited that for 3 years for the Bass Angler Sportsman Society. Let's see, I edited a regional section for Outdoor Life magazine for a couple of years, and then went to Washington, D.C. and worked for the NRA for 3 years in their publications division.
Yep.
Hated every minute of it.
Did you hate?
Not just because it was the NRA, mostly it was because I was in D.C.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was before they moved out to Virginia. We were in D.C.
And that was, I mean, we've heard that even more recently in people who work for the NRA. There's a lot of great people who work for the NRA Publications.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
right.
super awesome people, knowledgeable. But it can be weird, and we have that in, at least for a while, the Outdoor Life Field and Stream thing. They were based in Manhattan, New York City, which is like, we're writing about, mule deer hunting and trout fishing, and a certain number of people have to be staffed there. And it's weird being like, well, we're based out of Manhattan.
I was courted by all those magazines to go work in Manhattan and say, we would like you to come edit. I said, no. I said, it makes no sense. I love the outdoors. Why am I going to work in downtown Manhattan on Madison Avenue? And my line to them was, look, it's not that there's not enough money for you to get me there. It's just that you would be crazy to pay me that much, and I don't work for crazy people. So there's that.
Yeah, you'd have to work to be able to find a place to put your toes in the dirt in Manhattan.
Well, and commute. I mean, I was commuting an hour and a half each way in D.C.
Yeah.
So it'd be at least that in Manhattan. And besides, who wants to do that? So I got tired of doing the D.C. thing, and then went all the way from Washington, D.C. to Anchorage, Alaska. Edited Alaska magazine.
Yep.
Now, here's a geographical factoid for you. When you drive and you leave Washington, D.C., when you get to Seattle, you're halfway.
That's how far Alaska is.
It's 5 days to drive to Seattle. It's 5 days to drive to Anchorage.
People don't appreciate it. The maps don't really represent it accurately because it would look ridiculous and it's hard to fit on a piece of paper.
You got to look at a globe for it to work for you.
Yeah.
So we did Alaska magazine for 5 years, went down after that to Arizona, hand loader and rifle magazine, edited those, and then went back to Louisiana and spent 3 years at the university there. And weirdly enough, right now we're having the 35th anniversary of the movie Steel Magnolias. Mm-hmm. I wrote and published the Steel Magnolias scrapbook, which is a weird thing for an outdoor guy to do.
Yeah.
But it was filmed in our hometown.
You also, because you did a lot of freelancing. I recall you doing freelancing for some magazines that weren't necessarily outdoor magazines.
Mother Earth News. That was fun. That was weird because, like in their writer guidelines, it says, our readers don't like semicolons.
What?
I'm going, what? Yes. So I would write it in like the most baby talk way I could possibly. Then they would take and edit it and make it sound like more baby talk. And I would never let them use my real name. I always use a pseudonym. Yeah, I don't want my name appearing on this stuff. But their checks were good, right?
Yeah. Men's Journal?
Yeah, I wrote for Men's Journal.
Yeah?
Yeah, did some stuff there. That was weird. Jan Winter, that was one of his publications.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like Grits wrote for True and Argosy and Gentleman's Quarterly. And they actually had hunting articles and conservation articles in Gentleman's Quarterly and GQ.
Wow.
Back then. Pretty cool stuff.
That is cool.
So, you do what look, when you're freelancing, you do whatever you can do.
Yeah, you don't want to turn down work.
No. And then I had this weird conversation almost 30 years ago at the SHOT Show with Alan Gottlieb from the Second Amendment Foundation. And I went up to Alan. I remember it very clearly. I said, Alan, you publish books, I write, we got to do something together. I'm thinking maybe I could get a gig writing a book or something for him. And he said, well, you ever thought of doing radio? And I said, no. I said, I've been doing TV because at that point I was doing TV with Grits on ESPN. Mm-hmm. We had Sportsman's Team Challenge and all of that. He said, well, you got to think about doing radio. I said, well, how does that work? Well, I didn't know that he owned the network, the radio network. He said, well, you buy the time on the network and then you get to sell the advertising on it. I said, well, I don't know how to sell advertising. I can't do that. He said, well, think about it. So I went out on the SHOT Show floor the next day, talked to some friends. Ken Jorgensen was at Smith & Wesson at the time, first guy I talked to. Got to remember, this was 1995. Talk radio was pretty new. Rush Limbaugh had only been on the air 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Brand new deal. And talk radio, this was really almost pre-internet. It was the in run around the very liberal media. They couldn't stop.
Still then, It was still the same situation as we have today.
Very much so. The general media was very anti-gun, very liberal, but talk radio was a way you could get a message out. And Ken said, I said, I was thinking about this thing. I talked to this guy and about radio, and Ken said, oh yeah, we're in. I said, well, no, I don't have a show. He said, no, we're in. I said, well, I don't have rates. He says, Tom, you're not listening to me. He says, if it's talk radio and it's about guns and you're doing it, Smith & Wesson is in. Simple as that. He didn't know what he was signing on for, how much it was going to cost.
I don't even know what I'm selling you.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Do you understand how clueless I am here? So I went and talked to other people. I went back to Alan Gottlieb at noon. I said, I've got 5 sponsors. I don't even have a show. He said, oh, guess what? You just moved from 1 hour to 2 hours. I don't have a show.
I don't know what I'm doing.
So it's like, 6 weeks later, I'm on the air and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
You remember our good friend Bill?
Yep,
who is a radio professional. And after I did like 2 shows, our buddy Bill says, send me a tape of your show. So I sent it to him and he listened to it. He said, I got 2 comments. I said, okay. He says, it sounds like you're reading your opening. I said, well, yeah, I am. He says, don't. He says, you know this stuff. You don't have to write this thing out. I said, oh, okay.
But you're a writer and you feel like I'll write it out.
I'll write it out because I didn't know what I was doing. I was very insecure. He says, number 2, he says, what kind of a crappy microphone are you using? I said, well, I don't know. It's what somebody told me to get. He said, you're a photographer, right? I said, yeah. He says, you understand that the quality of your image has to go through the lens, and if it's a crummy lens, you get a lousy. I said, enough said. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Said,
What mic do I need, Bill?
It's all got to go through the mic. And Bill is a professional voiceover guy. You hear his voice on National Geographic specials and all that. Yeah. When he tells us what to do, we just listen and do it.
yeah,
He's
absolutely.
the guy that gives us those funny little things we do of the Hoppies #9 commercials and the funny intros and stuff. And I asked him one time, I said, well, I'd like to hire you for this. He said, you can't afford me. I said, what do you mean? He says, no. He says, my rates are way too high. He says, I just like doing this because he's a gun guy.
He's a gun guy.
He's a gun guy. And so we get a lot of support from people who just like what we do.
Yeah, we do. It's interesting. And during all of that, we also you got into TV, doing TV stuff. I mean, where did the TV start and how did it start?
Well, I started writing for Guns and Ammo, Peterson's Publications, so it's hunting, Peterson's Hunting, Guns and Ammo, those magazines. And then they decided to get into TV. And they knew I'd done work with Grits and ESPN and all. And so I started hosting. I did co-hosted with Craig Boddington, Peterson's Hunting, and then did some stuff on Guns and Ammo. And then we had a show that they were going to produce fell out, and they contacted me and said, hey, man, we got to come up with another show. And I said, well, I know what it should be about. Because by then I was doing the radio show. Mm-hmm. By doing the radio show, I would be about 5 years ahead of the industry in terms of what people were talking about.
Because it's a live call-in show.
People are calling. And I said, there are more women buying guns for self-protection than you're aware of. There are more seniors buying guns for self-protection than you're aware of. And people are buying guns for self-protection. You don't understand what's going on out here. This is why people buy guns.
They're still talking about 30-06, and it's like, that's fine, but that's not.
So I wrote up a 3-page rundown. I said, this is your new show. And we'll call it Personal Defense TV, PDTV. Well, what do you mean? I said, we're going to go get the best trainers. I said, because I'd worked with trainers before, and trainers are great. You know why? Because they stand in front of groups and deliver the message.
Right.
So you just turn a camera on and say, look, I need 2 minutes on the draw. And they do it. It's like you go to gun site. You get what And I said, we're going to get beside of you. We're going to go to gun site. We're going to do this. And we created PDTV. It was the first TV show about self-defense with guns. Okay, you're going to love this. A major handgun manufacturer, whose name we will not mention, who makes a lot of handguns for police departments, was approached about sponsoring the show.
We'll let people fill in the blank on this.
They can fill that in. They said, no, we would not to do that. Why is that? We do not make guns for shooting people. Which I'm thinking, well, 2 things. One, that's really all you make guns for.
Yeah.
And number 2, you do understand we're not actually going to shoot people on this show.
Right.
We're just going to the range and working with training
targets.
stuff. But nobody could envision what we wanted to do with the show.
Well, I mean, you think about, I'm not sure if the timing coordinates, but SHOT Show didn't have a tactical section.
They wouldn't even let AR-15s in.
I told someone that this past SHOT Show, and they said, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
So yeah, it's only
Yeah,
maybe 12, 15 years
15
ago.
years, yeah. Because they would not let anybody display or exhibit AR-15s.
That was like military and police. That was a tactical thing.
And of course, now the self-defense and the tactical is a huge part of the SHOT Show.
Yeah.
And of course, it's bled over. There's almost no delineation between what we buy and like to shoot at the range versus what the military uses or the police. And, the reality is, go all the way back, our bolt-action rifles came from the military.
That's what they were using.
Paul Mauser invented the bolt-action rifle, basically. The Springfield, the 03 Springfield, all the rest of that became our hunting rifles.
Which, that's why it's funny when people say military-style weapons. I mean, that's a made-up term. It's a silly thing. And also, you go, yeah, so? Like,
this is not a bad thing.
yeah, every single gun is military style.
Except that the people who are using that term, the gun ban industry, their point is, you're not military, so you should not have military style weapons. It's a way of, they want to get rid of all guns, but they can't do it all at once. They just take a slice at a time. So how can we demonize and alienate? We'll make up a term like Saturday Night Special, assault weapon, ghost gun, pick a number, weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war. Yeah, well, it's a semi-automatic rifle. Oh, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt used a semi-automatic rifle to hunt with 100 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
There's a particular gun that probably you should own like more than one in your gun collection, and it's the Ruger 1022 rifle. It is the classic semi-auto 22. One of the ones that I like is the Takedown. I mean, and as it sounds, you can basically take it in half and then put it right back together in about 3 seconds. So easy to pack away. Put it in a backpack, put it in your truck. Always have it at the ready for plinking, for target shooting, for varmint control, whatever it is. It's a fun gun, it's an accurate gun, it's a dependable gun. Go over to Ruger.com and go scope out some of their latest 1022 rifles. RangeReadyStudios.com. That's where we have all our training classes. You've heard me say it. Sign up for the email alerts. You'll be the first to be alerted about new classes. We have some special ones for the fall lineup that we're going to be posting very soon, so you're going to want to know about that. Go over to RangeReadyStudios.com and sign up. Aero Precision. You know them for ARs, but did you know they also do silencers, suppressors? And there probably couldn't be a better time ever to buy a silencer because the processing times are way down. They're happening very quickly, and you can get your tax stamp. They have the Lahar 30, which is a 30 cal can, workhorse, durability, performance, flexibility in a single package. Go over to AeroPrecisionUSA.com. Look up the Lahar 30 to learn all the cool stuff they're doing. They even have a 30K, the shorter version. TSOS USA, making guns, bringing in guns from Turkey that are quality, that are less expensive. The one I'm looking at right now is the TSOS 1911 D10. Why a D10, Ryan? That's right, 10 millimeter. If you listen to this show, if you listen to Gun Talk Radio, you're probably a 10 millimeter fanboy, and that's totally fine with us. We love it. So go check it out. This is a nice looking two-tone 1911 hammer forged barrel, Colt Series 70 based internals, flared ejection port, just all the bells and whistles on this sucker. And they always put the price on there because it's always pretty impressive, $7.99. Go over to TSOSUSA.com to learn more. SecureItGunStorage.com is where you go to find out about their gun storage options, whether that's gun safes or gun storage. One of the things they do that's kind of neat is long gun storage. And I'm talking about a long box, or if you want, a horizontal long box that will hold 1 or 2 long guns, and it's a lockable. Think of it as a quick access handgun vault for a long gun. You can learn more over at SecureItGunStorage.com, and these are called the Fastbox Model 40, the Fastbox Model 47, a little bit longer, 47 inches. So depending on what you need, you could store these around your house, in a closet, in a shop, whatever it may be, and you're going to have a long gun at the ready. You think back over doing all this stuff, being a writer and doing the TV shows and all that. You did a bunch of traveling. I mean, people know we kind of talk about we're going on this media event or that media event, and that's kind of one of the ways that this industry does business. Of we're going to take the media out to cover a new thing. In another business, they would take you on a golf outing, right? I mean,
Right.
if you were working in food and beverage,
Right.
like they don't take you to go food and beverage. You know, they take you golfing.
Yeah, they do
or
a
whatever.
recreational thing.
But it is funny how in our industry, like, what do you do for fun? Well, we shoot and hunt.
Yeah.
But that's work.
We're going to go
It's
to,
also
yeah, that's what we do. We're going to go on a hunt. We're going to go to a range. We're going to try new guns. We're going to do this, all that kind of thing. I do want to transition, though, because you were talking about the TV. You left off the fun part, which is this,
yeah.
what you're doing here. And I don't know, 16 or so years ago, actually right after Hurricane Katrina, because you were living in New Orleans, you got impacted. Like, I would say you got impacted. Like,
Yeah. House gone.
blew down your house and flooded it, and everything went away. And
Some
okay.
impact.
And then I said, hey,
It's a blessing, though. Just side note, if you can get your house floods with everything inside of it and you bulldoze with everything inside of it, it's a fresh start.
there's that.
You just go,
Because
"Oh."
you really wanted to move anyway, and you didn't have to move anything.
Yeah, I didn't have to move anything.
Whatever was in the car when you left was what you ended up with. It's just pretty simple.
If I had known, I would have taken more things. I thought we were just gonna, go stay in a hotel for a couple days.
You thought it was going to be a 3-hour tour.
It'll turn and go to Galveston or something, and
no.
we'll come back and sweep up the
Hurricane
leaves.
Katrina said, where's Ryan's house? I want to go right there.
Yeah,
So I said, hey, you want to come do some TV stuff with me? Because at that point, I had been creating TV shows for other people. I said, there's no reason I can't do that for myself. Mm-hmm. Why don't we create our own TV? Well, before we did TV, you and I, we were actually creating online videos about shooting and guns. Nobody else was doing that.
yeah,
There was no YouTube.
yeah. It
Really?
was
You remember that?
probably very early. I'm not sure. YouTube was probably maybe it was been out for a couple of years, but
Yeah,
it wasn't
it
as
was
big of a thing.
brand new.
I mean, YouTube at that time, we still will say this phrase, but like it was silly cat videos. Like it really was like, oh, okay. And now we're like people have YouTube as their television.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, so we said, let's do, and I went out and bought video cameras. I'm a photographer, but I'd never used video cameras. Just
Yeah.
like, okay, we'll figure it out.
And it's funny. Just the other day we were talking about some old, revitalizing some content that we put out several years back, and I said, except season 1 of Guns and Gear, let's not post that again. It'll just be people going, "Wow, that wasn't very good." Yeah, I know.
We were learning.
I mean, maybe there was some fun stuff in there. There was some useful content, but as far as just TV production, it was
Yeah, but to be fair, okay, when we started doing our videos, maybe they weren't very good, but nobody else was doing them. We were the first people to do videos. Mm-hmm. When you started doing FPD,
yeah.
no one else was doing videos about personal defense on force.
Well, and force on force, Simunitions, force on force is, using paintball guns to run these scenarios. It was always law enforcement and military.
Right.
It had never been a civilian thing.
And I'll just say, giving credit where credit is due, this was your idea. No one ever done it, and you said, why don't we do this? And I go, really? Okay, that'd be cool. I mean, I'd done that, in training.
Right.
And then what we didn't realize was how difficult it is to show that.
Yeah, to capture it
It's
on
like
video.
You can't really do it with 2 cameras. So how many cameras do you run now for FPD?
Like 10? I mean, maybe more than that. I mean, because it'd be between, camera operated camera or man operated cameras,
Right.
remote cameras,
Security
cameras, GoPros on helmets. It's a lot to capture.
And we started doing this before, really right at the first edges of GoPro.
Right. Yeah,
It's
true.
like we're trying to figure out, how do you make this
Well,
work?
what's funny is, so when we started this, then it's so, guys, don't come up with new ideas and blaze a trail. It's just a pain in the butt. Wait
There's
till the trail is blazed.
There's a reason they call it the bleeding edge. You're on the cutting
it's
edge,
not
yes, but
fun
it's also
sometimes.
the bleeding edge. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding, but it's like, we'd have to explain to Simunitions, which was a company owned by General Dynamics. We need to get these kits in, and they were conversion kits on real guns, and it's all law enforcement stuff.
Right.
So if you said, oh, we want to show it on a little gun, it doesn't work. Like it doesn't, they don't have something for that. So we'd have to.
It wouldn't function. The
It wouldn't
gun actually
function. It
wouldn't
had to be a
run.
full-size Glock, a full-size M&P.
Right.
They did have a kit for a revolver. That was great because it was kind of universal for a bunch of different types of revolvers. But then just coming up with scenarios that are scenarios and situations for the regular concealed carry good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fun over the years doing that show. We're still doing it. Season 12 or 13, something like that.
It is honestly one of the most instructive and useful things because we get feedback from people say, watching first-person offender saved my life. Or the guy who said, probably saved the life of my child.
Mm-hmm.
Where he said, my wife had her carry permit, but she didn't carry. I started watching FPD. I liked it. I had her start watching it. She liked it. She watched a whole bunch of them. And then she said, maybe I ought to start carrying again. And she was carrying in their front yard when a neighbor's pit bull went after her child.
Mm-hmm.
And she smoked this dog right there at her feet.
Right. Yeah.
He said, I don't know what would have happened, but if it hadn't been for FPD, it would have been tragic.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff you think, okay, this is a fun educational thing to do. When you get that feedback, you go, all right, this is more than that.
It's important. Well, it puts people into those scenarios, even just watching it. They're kind of putting themselves into those scenarios. What would I do? And then we obviously give them training. Hey, here's some thoughts. Here's some different ways to handle it. And we always have people go, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, or they're second guessing what should have happened. And the people who go through force on force, it's just so completely different than square range training.
It's hard to explain it. You can talk to people about it. We've had some really interesting reactions from people. One young lady we had, it's like, okay, do the scenario. Okay, fine. And you're going to start here, and you're going to walk out to the parking lot. You're going to get in your car. You've been shopping. Okay, fine. And then we said, and here's your baby.
Mm-hmm.
Gave her a doll. And she went from this being an interesting exercise to the most mean, vicious, violent person. When that guy came along and tried to snatch that baby
steal the
out
baby.
of her,
Yeah, we turned that into a kidnapping. Yeah.
It turned into a kidnapping attempt. She was fine. She used to walk along. And it was just like when this guy reached out to grab her baby, a switch was flipped.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a string of expletives. You're going, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I might have said this on the show before, but there are some common recurring mistakes and also common recurring ways people do a good job on the show.
Okay.
And they're the same ones, right? What you just described is she turned it on and said, wait a minute, I have to fight.
Right.
I've heard it called turning on the mean gene. Mm-hmm. You got to get mean. We've also had several people, they just didn't. I mean, we had a guy, basically the wife gets abducted. I think it was at knife point or gun point. And the guy's, the bad guy is saying, I got her, back away. And he's got his gun out.
Right.
Hey, put down the knife, 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 put down. As the bad guy just walks away, puts his wife in the car and drives away.
Wow.
The whole time. And I'm going, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
He goes, man, my wife, he just took my wife. Going,
No.
yeah, man.
No, you just let him take your wife.
Like, okay, I'm glad we're doing this.
Right.
Because, let's think about this. If you've never thought about, there comes a time when there is a line in the sand that has to be drawn. Taking your loved one, putting them in a car should be a line in the sand. And the problem is, if you've never thought about it, and it's okay. It's to say, well, most people are good and bad things don't happen here and all that. I don't want you to walk around scared, but if you've never considered the fact that do you live near an interstate? Well, guess what? There's bad people near you.
Oh, yeah.
We live in a little town. How far are you from the interstate? Oh, we're about 5 miles off the interstate.
Think they can drive there?
Do you think that perhaps bad people drive up and down I-90 or up and down I-10?
I told you, I'm reading a book right now. It goes to this exactly. Title of the book is When Violence is the Answer. And the concept of it starts off, first line is, violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer.
Right.
And it's about getting your mind right so that you can recognize it, avoid it if possible. And if it's not avoidable, you know what to do. And as you say, flip the switch and turn the mean gene on, because now it's a matter of seconds or microseconds that may be the difference between you or your loved ones living or dying.
The other thing I see on that show is people, I feel it's a recurring teaching point. People sometimes think, well, you've armed me with a gun, I'm concealed carrying, and there's going to be an attack. So I got to shoot somebody. And they think, I got to be as fast as possible. I got to be fast. I got to beat the bad guy to it.
Right.
And I think in those exercises and in real life, sometimes being strategic and tactical about waiting your turn, as John Correa recently said on the show, waiting your turn is a really good idea. I think if you're a gun guy, gun gal, and you follow pages on Facebook and Instagram and all, and YouTube, and it's, draw it at first shot, 1 second, draw it at first shot, 1.2 seconds. That is good. It's a really important skill to have, to be able to cleanly draw your gun and shoot and hit a target.
When it's necessary.
When it's necessary, but that is not always the case. And there are so many times when, drawing your gun and shooting a bad guy when he has a gun pointed at you, you're going to get shot.
If he's pointing the gun at you. Yes.
If he's pointing the gun at you, you're going to get shot.
You're not going to outdraw him.
And it's like, hey, how'd that go? I thought it went real well. Did you get shot? Yeah, I got shot like 3 times. Okay, it didn't go well.
That's not a good outcome.
I don't know how to put it this way, but no, it didn't go well.
Getting shot is not a good outcome. No, that's right.
So yeah, I think that's another thought that people need to have. It's great to practice going to the range, practice dry fire, practice your draw, all good skills to have. But that's the part of force on force that's different, because this is not a target where you say threat and then everybody draws their gun and shoots the target.
Yeah. Part of that is, we've seen it many times, you can practice the most important part of this without a gun. And that is, the most important part of it is, how do I avoid it? And if it starts, how do I get out of it without having to pull my gun out? Mm-hmm. And we do that. It's like we had a scenario where there were 2 guys and they get into a fight, and this guy is just working in his garage, and he sees these 2 guys fighting, and one guy pulls out a gun and shoots the other one. So he decides to pull his gun and start shooting. And I remember you walked up and said, well, who'd you shoot?
That was
the good guy.
As we started out, how'd that go? I thought that went pretty well. Put shots on target. And go, cool. Who was he? And he's just like, I don't know.
Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Was he a plainclothes cop? What was going on here? I don't know. I just shot him.
He was chest out, head up, and then he went, oh.
Yeah.
And just like head went down, went, wait a minute. Did I shoot the wrong guy?
Right.
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know who he was.
Or right behind you, there's a door.
Mm-hmm.
If you had turned around and gone through the door, you would have been safe. You wouldn't have shot anybody, and you could have called 911.
Yeah.
Turning around and getting out of the situation is almost always the correct move.
I wonder about when we have these incidences is that a word? Incidences?
Incidents?
Sure. I don't know. New word, TM, that happen, and the bad guy is in a crowd of people. The bad guy is in a movie theater, and the thing plays out, and either the bad guy shoots himself or the cops come and shoot him or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're like, man, there wasn't even any good guys there. How do you know? How do you know? At the parade, at the movie theater.
Maybe he had the good sense to not just start flinging bullets.
I mean, one could argue he should have done something if you're a concealed carry guy in that movie theater. But if he is like, I got to get out of here, runs for cover, some people don't carry to save the world. They carry to save themselves.
Well, and imagine you have your child with you at the movie theater.
Right.
Are you going to choose to engage in a gunfight, or are you going to try to shield that youngster and get out of there?
Right.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I just think you got to do those mental exercises and think through that stuff.
That's what it comes down to, is that if you haven't thought of it ahead of time, you won't know what to do. And chances are you will default to your movie, TV training.
Yeah, man, movies and TV shows.
They screw you up on this because
they do.
Everything they teach you is wrong. And I don't care if it's John Wick or John Wayne.
Also, another pro tip for you, everybody. When you shoot the bad guy and he goes down, that's not the signal to go get the gun from him.
Kick the gun away.
Kick the gun away.
Whatever. Distance is your friend. You have a force projection system in your hand. The reason that we use guns instead of swords is because it allows you to have distance.
And I'll be specific about this. What I would love to see for these first-person offender participants is not only stay back and keep your gun pointed at the bad guy, even if he's not even wiggling,
right?
But also work your way around behind him so that he can't lift his head up and see you. You're behind him. If he lifts up his head and picks up the gun and wants to go reanimate and start hurting people, you can engage him from a distance. It doesn't even necessarily have to be real far.
No.
You could be 10 or 20 feet away.
Well, it's not unlike when I shot a Cape Buffalo. He runs off. The professional hunter says, okay, he's out there, but we're not going to go down that trail that he just went down. We're going to go way out here. We're going to circle around. And when we came back up behind him, he was sitting on the trail with his head up, waiting for us. He was going to try to kill us.
Looking down the trail.
He was waiting for us.
Yeah.
And we came in on the backside, exactly what you're talking about. Not really any different.
There's a reason why they call those guys Black Death.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. So, and part of that is I never thought of that. Why not? Because you've never seen it in the movies. Mm-hmm. If you don't fill your vacuum with good information, it gets filled with junk that you aren't even aware that's getting filled up with the movies, with TV, with stupid stuff, and part of it with stupid things that people say on the internet. Well, if he's in my house, I'm going to shoot him. Well, what if it's your drunk neighbor who got confused and he thinks he's in his own house?
Right.
You might want to identify what's going on here and not just blanket say, if he's in my house, I'm going to shoot him.
That stuff goes around and gets repeated and repeated and repeated.
It gets in your head. And if you don't, it brings us right back to where we end up in the beginning is if you don't get good training, then you really are probably wrong on most things. Mm-hmm. The reality is you probably almost everything you know about self-defense with guns is wrong.
Yeah. And it's not all about the shooting part.
Almost none of it's about the shooting part.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about thinking your way through it. I mean, honestly, that's what a lot of this force-on-force training is. You do it once, you're overwhelmed. You do it a second time, you're less overwhelmed. By the time you get to the fourth or fifth time, you're actually problem solving and seeing things like almost an out-of-body experience as you're working your way through. What do I do? How do I there's no way to get there without going and doing this training. And again, we always say, you don't know what you don't know. It's hard to explain it to people if you haven't been there. All I can say is just go do it. And which leads me to where we're sitting right now, Range Ready Studios. I think what you have done with this place is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you took a facility, and that's being very kind. It was a wreck. It was ruins.
It was beautiful. What are you talking about?
You could see the sky from inside the building.
I wasn't scared to be here at night.
I was.
The first we bought the building and we were coming out here occasionally. We got a guy to basically literally deliver a pile of dirt in the back.
Right.
So we had a berm. And we would come out here to do some shooting, some filming. And
it was a dirt pile.
The first time it was KJ out here after dark. And he texted me a little bit after sunset. And he's like, hey, leaving the property, dude, that place is creepy at night. I don't want to be there.
Well, it was a slaughterhouse. You've got the hooks on the pulleys on the walls where they had cows and You had huge holes in the concrete floor where the blood would run down, and they'd wash
That
it
is
down
true.
through
You
there.
don't tell people; they won't want to come here. It's pretty now.
It's cool now.
You know,
it's great.
We did a bunch of
Preserved
renovation.
a little bit. You got like some of the beams from.
Yeah, there's a little whisper of the industrial slaughterhouse vibe
It was
there.
cool.
But yeah, this place is kind of neat. It's not a big place. I mean, but that's kind of the appeal, and that's what I think a lot of people like about it is it's very efficient. We've classroom, walk right out to the range. You don't have to. Okay, you're going to drive down this dirt road, and the 19th bay is going to be your bay.
Yeah, you're one.
And there's also
yards from their line.
County SWAT is doing long range sniper training. So watch for the red flag because they're actually shooting over the road right now.
Yeah,
so be careful. No,
this is all that's going on here.
yeah, it's pretty self-contained, and so it's efficient.
Literally
it's good.
from the classroom to the shooting range is 75 yards, maybe.
Yeah, we just walk over there.
You walk out the door, you're on the range.
But it's a real classroom with real bathrooms, which I know people keep telling me they like.
That's a good point.
And I will say the cleanest porta potty in America, at least in the state of Louisiana.
Okay.
It was brand new when we got. I said, well, I guess we need a porta potty out there at the range just for efficiency. Give people that option. Just duck in there, do what they got to do. They delivered a brand new, still in the wrapper, porta potty, porta john.
Right.
And every week the company comes and cleans it, and there are weeks that it never gets used.
But it's being cleaned every week.
Every
anyway.
week they come in and spray it and clean it. And so I'm just bragging about the porta john. I mean, of course, that's perhaps not the fanciest
You
part
put that
of
on the
this.
website.
I should, right?
A separate little page.
It's kind of a Buc-ee's thing, right? Buc-ee's bathrooms, you know. Apparently that's
bathrooms. I said, there's two things about our bathrooms that people like. Number one and number two.
That's funny.
I know. Isn't that funny?
It's good.
That's good marketing.
It's bathroom humor.
Hey, we liked bathroom humor from the very first time we understood what humor was about.
I don't care who you are. It's funny.
There you go.
I'm sorry. That's the way you get your kids to laugh when you're a dad.
That's right.
And then you're like, don't tell mom I did that.
Right. And of course, they run and tell mom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Dad was making sounds with his mouth. Hey, you little rat.
That's right. Don't rat me out here.
Yeah, well, they'll have to come down. Range Ready is fun. We're getting more classes coming, and
You got a lot of classes.
Yeah.
And the problem is, well, it's the good news. The bad news is you got so many popping up that you either have to go back and look at the website often, or if you're smart, you sign up for the newsletter.
sign up for the emails.
And then you'll actually be notified when
we
a new
don't send
class
out a
pops
bunch
up.
of emails, but we do. I mean, we literally in meetings say, okay, Range Ready email list gets the email first about this new class schedule.
And a lot of times they sell out.
Yeah, we have 10, 12, 15 spots in a class, depending on the class.
It's not big classes.
It's not very many.
Right.
So, well, thanks for being on with us. I'm glad we found you wandering around.
I got lost, how it is, wandering around. They actually got a class going on right now. We're kind of walking around, talking to some of the people here. Got a guy who came here from Anchorage, Alaska,
Yeah.
down here to take this class.
Maybe he was just escaping the last bits of winter.
Could be. He could have been just as lost as I am. Kindred spirits right here.
All right, guys, that's it for us. We'll see you next time on Gun Talk Nation. To see all of Gun Talk's content, go to guntalk.com, guntalktv.com, or sign up for the Gun Talk newsletter.